Hi everybody, Igal Svet. I oversee documentaries at Discovery Plus and am an EP on this incredible project. We have a pretty long journey ahead of us, so I'll be brief. But I do have to say that this is an incredibly special project. I've been a huge fan of Jules and Gédéon Naudet for a long time. If you're not familiar with their work, you should start with 9/11, which I think is the best film on the subject matter, and they have since made an incredible lineup of films, including November 13th, Attack in Paris, The Gatekeepers, which was another film that Discovery has done with the brothers, and we've been looking to do a film with them ever since. And after January 6th took place, we took the pitch from Propagate and Howard Owens and Jules and Gédéon, and they presented a vision that was as apolitical as you can get for a film about January 6th. It was looking at the day from the point of view of the people who were there, from the police to the members of Congress, and really outlining the tic-tac of the day in a way that we haven't heard before. We had complete trust that they will deliver a work of art, and they did. And I'm just so grateful to have been working with the brothers and to being able to even introduce them, because this is a remarkable film. The last thing I'll say, the timing is fascinating. I mean, we're just past the midterms and the country's as divided as it comes. But when you watch this film, I hope you'll come out of it seeing how the human experience and subtle acts of bravery ultimately do bring us all together. And I'm just so honored to introduce Jules and Gédéon Naudet. And please stick around after the film for a Q&A. Who's the moderator?
It's going to be Alex Shephard from the New Republic.
Shephard from, Jules and Gédéon Naudet, everybody.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank Doc NYC for having us here, and Igal, of course. Having great partners like Discovery is always incredibly precious for us. As we always say, a documentary is like a baby with a lot of fathers and mothers, and a lot of them are here today. So thank you to all of you who have participated and given your blood, sweat, and tears for this project. We tried to do something as apolitical as possible, as difficult as it is for a political moment such as it is, but we hope that it would have worked to highlight more of the humanity that happened that day. A lesson we learned on 9/11 when we realized that the moment that you see the worst of mankind, you see the best. And that's what we hope to show today in the small moments of peace and moments of courage. And hopefully you'll tell us in 2.5 hours if we succeeded or not. But enjoy, and we'll take some questions later on if you have any. Enjoy.
Thank you all. Please stick around for the Q&A after.
Can you hear me? Yeah? I talk very quickly. Thank you for also getting closer. So we haven't met, but I want to say, first of all, thank you. I think this is just an extraordinary and deeply affecting movie, and I think it's, to my mind, the most comprehensive accounting of that day. The other two films of yours that I've seen are about the September 11th attacks, about the November 13th attack in Paris. I wanted to ask, first of all, when did you decide that this was going to be your next project, and were you thinking about those other two films when you were making this?
Before I get into that, I want to acknowledge that a lot of our team that made this documentary. Again, making a documentary is like having a baby with multiple fathers and mothers, and a lot of them are here today. And if we can stand up, as well as some of the people that were interviewed. So bravo to all of you. So we first had the idea, I think, when we were watching the impeachment that followed right after that. And when I think on the first day, they were showing kind of a 20-minute compilation of what happened and some of the stories. And I think we, both of them looked at each other and said, I think it brought us a lot of things that we were always interested in, because everything for us kind of goes back to September 11, on a day that we saw the worst of humanity, and what helped us kind of survive through our trauma, through our depression at the time, was to see that in parallel to that, we saw the best of human nature. And we were immediately struck by seeing the same kind of things. These moments where your entire life is crumbling all around you and you don't know if you might make it. To see that these incredible moments, big or small, you know, whether it is the police officers and first responders helping and saving literally the lives of these people, but also, as we saw Jason Crow just putting his hand on Congresswoman Weil and just saying, we're going to be okay. In these moments, little moments like this of humanity can make all the difference. And that's what we wanted to say. I think we were definitely influenced by 9/11, but especially the one we had done on November 13. I think there was a lot of common elements that we can find.
I guess there's another question that struck me, at least as I was thinking about this, where those are films about terrorist attacks that are people who come outside, and that they, whether, depending on how you want to talk about it, there are attacks aimed at democracy or freedom, other things as well. But this is obviously was perpetrated almost entirely by American citizens. Did that strike you as you were thinking about this, that for the last 20 years, the West has been obsessed, frankly, with threats from the outside, but what we've been dealing with, particularly since the 2020 election, has been this sort of rise of an insurgent movement within the United States?
I don't think it factored into what we wanted to say. I think what we've always tried to accomplish is that moments like this, we see the big picture. We kind of forget that there is human beings in there. And what we've always tried to do is to show that under that title of senator or congressman and woman or staffer or journalist or police officers under that uniform, there is a father, there is a mother, there is a son, there is a daughter, there is a human being. And that's always, I think, is a through line through all of our films, is trying to show our definition of heroes, which is ordinary people doing extraordinary things at a moment outside of the scope of normality in a way. And so it was just, politics didn't enter into it. Actually, we didn't want to make a political documentary. That's why we didn't do an investigation or all that. We just concentrated on, when life collapses around you, these examples of humanity. That's all that interests us, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me, I guess, was I found myself, it was the first time I've been covering the hearings, but it was the first time I remembered what it felt like that day, I think, because usually I'm a political reporter and analyst, I just run my mouth all the time, but this is the first time, even when I just came back to the last 20 minutes of the movie and just found myself tearing up at these moments. But one of the things that was surprising to me was how abstracted, I guess, in some ways, that event has become. And one of the questions I had for you is, did working on the film change your conception of what happened on January 6th at all, or was this sort of pursuit of just finding the sort of humanity within the event, was that just always the fixation of that?
No, we were not. We didn't change. The idea of what we were going to do. We knew that there was enough stories. There were over 3,000 stories on that day, and every single one was going to be extraordinary. But it's also the opportunity to maybe, if you don't mind, hijack your question.
Yeah, please do.
To say that what also was extraordinary on that day is that the reason why we have all those images that you've seen and that you've seen before in television is because it's not because of the networks, actually, it's because of the freelancers, and some of them are here today, who basically were the only one who actually got in when all the camera crew from networks, and there were a lot of them, at the scene, none of them could get in. But the one who got in, the one who got us those extraordinary moments, this footage, are the freelancers. And it's interesting to see how they basically were here for us and for the history books. We're talking about 9/11 before. 9/11 there were no iPhones. We were the only one with cameras. At the time, if had been the case, there would be thousands of accounts of what happened inside those towers. But here, over 20 years later, you have the world looking, everybody has an iPhone, and the only one who really brought back home, again for the history books, what really happened inside are the freelancers. So we just wanted to be grateful and thank them again, because we've met many of them and interviewed. And again, so sorry, one more. And so they were here at the Capitol, but they're here every single day all around the country. When there is a Oath Keeper meeting, they're here. When there is a little thing, a rally somewhere in the far east, far west, far south, it's not the network camera crew who's there. It's this guy or girl who's here with a little camera and make sure that everything is recorded. And this is extraordinary. Without them, the democracy would not have those witnesses.
I'm wondering, just as filmmakers too, I mean, one of the things that did stand out to me about this is just how much footage there is. And I mean, there's a real, I think, impressive sort of multimedia quality to this, where you're stitching together security camera footage, iPhones. There are these amazing moments in it where you're seeing people committing felonies while there are, there are freelance photographers, there are TV crews, there are also like 14 other people in MAGA hats filming them do all these things. What was the process like for you to sort of find this footage, and also what do you think about making documentaries about contemporaneous events in an era in which essentially people are live streaming almost everything that they do?
Well, I think it doesn't change the fact that you need an incredible team, and our incredible team of researchers is here today, and that's the most tireless people who work day and night, do knock on doors if they need to, and call everyone and find these incredible treasure trove of images, and we keep bothering them. I think they're the ones who work the longest on the project, because as soon as we start, they already started gathering, and it's, again, every documentary is a little family that puts everything they can into it, their heart, their soul, tears, sweat, and it's only through these incredible professionals that the work can be shown. So it's we owe them, as usual, quite a lot.
You're talking about how many stories there are in this day. I think it's one of the things that is captured very effectively in this, and it's extraordinarily moving. You talked to, at least by my count, only 3 Republicans, I think.
Yes.
Did you try to talk to more?
We sent every Republican senator received an email. Probably 100 Republican House members received email. I think it was a little bit more complicated for them to participate. Some did, which we appreciate. We wanted more, but I think for them it was the calculation was a little bit more complicated than for Democrats. So, we tried. We would have loved to have as much as an equal number. It was just not in the cards, I guess.
It's a very collegial answer, but I guess another question is, that was one of the things I thought was most effective about the film is that you talked to 2 of the 3 are people who continue to object to, or at least objected to certifying the election. I guess one, I wanted to ask why you thought that was so important to include. I think there's obviously a huge debate about how we in the press cover 2020 conspiracy theories. But I think also, what was the experience? Was the experience interviewing them different than it was for talking to their Democratic colleagues?
Not at all. I think the process was identical. It was, our process is really what starts way before we interview these people and they sit down. There is a lot of work of gaining the trust. Trust is earned, it's not given, and so you have to take the time. You have to explain to people what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to say, what we don't. We're not trying to say, and then to have them sit. And I think 2 in particular, of course, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger were willing to participate. I think they were there both at a different perspective also, which was important for us. I think at the end of the day, we didn't choose them because of last name, but more because of their stories. There is a couple of Republicans that we couldn't put just because they didn't fit in the story. So it's always for us, it's just, it has to bring something. Adam Kinzinger being in a different building and taking out his gun and all that, I thought was a fascinating way to look at a different perspective. And Liz Cheney being in the middle of it was also important. So it was not selected by name, but more by their stories, because at the end it's always the stories that are the most important.
I assume you've been following the House hearings on January 6th as well. I was wondering too, is that a challenge for you in terms of incorporating that? I mean, one of the things that I found most fascinating about covering this is that in some ways we've known this, the story is quite simple, right? A mob essentially descended on the Capitol to try to delay the certification of the election. It's not, that much more complicated than that, and yet, over these hearings, there has been, I think, a wealth of new information that's come out. Were you trying to sort of keep a pace with that, or did that not really affect your approach?
If I may. I think we followed honestly more to see what kind of images they had, and so what they would release. If it was on TV, we could use them. But since again, it was more what January 6th committee is doing is a real investigation. But that was never what we wanted. Again, we're not journalists, we're not reporters. So in terms of the stories, I think they were not concentrating too much on that human side of it, which is normal. That's not their intent. So we were, of course, just as students of politics and fascinated with what was happening, we were watching. But very honestly, it was more for the images that we might be able to scoop up at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, you talked to several dozen Capitol Hill and Metropolitan Police officers. Those I think are some of the most moving moments in the film. They're also some of the funniest too. But I was wondering, one of the things for me, at least, I was not there. I knew people who talked to a lot of people who were there, but there was a moment, at least on the outside, where there was a sense of this as this kind of, not as a frenzied mob, at least as the first initial reports were mostly the footage you were seeing was people kind of gawking, in the rotunda. But what I think your film unspools in this really profound way is just, this is like, it's a frenzied mob. It's like something you would read about, from hundreds of years ago. I was wondering what the experience of talking to these people was like, and also, how that interacted with your other films as well.
On this, what was, meeting all of these police officers, first at either their homes or over lunch, I think that's where we had a lot in common with whether it was 9/11 or the one about the terrorist attacks in Paris, where first responders were reacting to their own trauma. I think that was something that we were unfortunately very familiar with, and to see the same signs, the same way, they have a term, a clinical term for first responders and their trauma is the Superman complex. It's professions, I should say, where you always have to project strength and project, the fact that you kind of never show weakness. And so it's always what we found that causes a problem, because you cannot heal if you're not accepting that there is trauma, and having, known that, 4 police officers committed suicide after that. We knew the insidiousness of trauma and how it could be, and so talking to them was very therapeutic, not only for us, but I think for them, just to kind of give them a little roadmap into what we had seen, other first responders, firefighters in particular, deal with what they were dealing with. And so that was very touching and heartbreaking to see these incredible people who had put their lives on the lines being brought down by trauma and all the horrors that PTSD can bring you.
Just one thing I also, without getting too political, wanted to ask you about was also, as you were working on this film, not just these hearings were happening, but you've also seen states pass a series of laws that are, essentially sort of aimed at creating kind of legal infrastructure to do what the January 6th rioters essentially wanted to do anyways. You've seen, as one of, somebody I think remarks, I think the head of the Metropolitan, or one of the Capitol Hill police officers says, a third of the country, believes that, it's a congressman who says, believes that this never happened. Were there moments when you were seeing all of these things happen, using the persistence of the idea that the November 2020 election was stolen, that you were just like, what's wrong with everyone here? Or,
Well, you have two things. Of course, you have our own personal feelings, which we always try to stay away from putting in our documentaries. But no, I think the worst was really for us, and I think the film comes from that idea that a lot of people, and especially after it happened, were saying, it was a routine tourist, walk through the Capitol, which. When you look at the images, it's hard to imagine that. And so the idea was to be able to show, and that's why we're so happy to be able to do it with Discovery, kind of a neutral platform because our hope is that people can watch it and detach themselves from, their political beliefs, but at least watch what happens to these human beings. And from there, understand, that yes, it did happen, and the mob that attacked were violent and injured all of these police officers.
This president and this iteration of the Republican Party for years, there was still some strange part of me that was like, oh, this is the moment. This is when the fever is going to break, and that moment doesn't happen then. And that was I think it was the last time I ever thought that. But I was wondering, for you all, you include that as a kind of denouement almost. The film ends with the funeral of Brian Sicknick, but it's a very melancholy kind of way to end.
It's there's no happy ending in this one, so it's really no. But again, the idea was really, hopefully, if anything, good come out of this, is for people to at least. Realize what happened, a different perspective, maybe a different way that they've heard about it, and hear the stories, especially on their very personal stories. We hope that by these people being not just Capitol or police officers or Metro police officers or senators or congressmen and women, to see human beings and to project maybe themselves and saying, okay, what would I have reacted if I was there? Would I have made that phone call to say goodbye? Would I have thought that it was the end? And that if we can reach a few people, at least, our job would have been done.
Well, I think it is a film that will do that, but I just want to thank you again for your time, and particularly for this incredible film.
Thank you for having us. Does anyone have any questions? During, you mean? Yes, actually, we talked to a lot of them. They were simply not enough police officers.
Even with the reinforcements?
Even with the reinforcements, their most important way was to actually get people out. That was the most important they needed to do. For some, they started arresting them, and then they said, yes, but now what? If we arrest these people, you need officers to stay with them, we need a place to put them, and there was simply no place.
For example, there is a few stunts where Ray, one of the officers, literally arrests a guy, and the guy...
one who says he has the 2 knives on him.
Yeah.
And he arrests another guy.
Right.
And the guy is stupid enough to say, no, don't arrest me, I'm a cop. And he put his badge. And of course, Ray wants to arrest him. And his superiors say, you have to let him go, because if you arrest him, you have to take him downstairs. We don't have a jail inside the Capitol. That means that at least one guy has to stay with him. And then I'm missing one guy at the door and during the entire day, it was the speech of the superiors who were completely heartbroken, but being forced to release literally dozens and dozens and dozens of people.
So we have to leave it there, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to you as well.
One more question, it's okay.
I'm just getting
I know.
So, one question. The captain of I think it's the DC police or the Capitol Police, was grateful when the Virginia troops came. But that was hours and hours and hours. Wasn't anybody just plain pissed off because the National Guard wasn't called, the Defense Department was very slow to react, I was surprised that they, yes, happy that the cavalry finally came in, but was nobody just horrified?
Yes, but they had a job to do. You know how they are. You know, they're pissed and they're grumbling and all that. But you know, there's holes to be plugged in that tunnel, and so you just go and do the job and hope that they'll come. But yeah, no, it was very, and I think that's why you saw a lot of the suicides after. I think it was that sense that they felt left behind and abandoned, exactly. And so that was complicated for them. But that's, you know, it's, you do what there was the best you have, and the best you had was just the ones that were around you.
And the stories, for example, in the tunnel, we couldn't put even like a quarter of the, I mean, we kept a quarter, but there was so many other stories of police officers being stabbed with knives and things like that. And it should have been a 10-hour film. But they were so exhausted. And that's why one of the officers, Isaac, said that they were literally, maybe at 5-10 minutes close, they were ready to shoot.
Yeah.
And he says it. So at the moment where you think, all right, they are police officers, what kind of mental set must you be when you're ready to just shoot everybody in front of you?
Well, he said hell would have been unleashed.
Yes.
Well, and there we have to leave it, but thank you again.